Hello and welcome to Analyzing Workforce Needs for Microcredentials. I'm Bucky Dodd, and I'm going to be guiding us through this conversation around how we understand the different market dynamics and needs that inform the way that we might go about designing microcredential programs. So in order to first understand this sort of need and process, I think it's important to understand how microcredentials sit from a strategic level. So this diagram really shows the connection points between some key functions and players. So microcredentials and their strategies sit at the intersection of learners, industries, and communities. So learners often will have needs that bring them to a microcredential, to needing to take a microcredential, pursue one. It might be a career advancement, or it might be general curiosity or enjoyment. There's often some sort of need or driver that brings a learner to needing to complete a microcredential or wanting to complete a microcredential. Now, oftentimes that is intersected with an industry need. So whether a learner may have a career advancement goal, industries will also have an employment goal or sort of a workforce goal that connects with that. And so at the intersection between learners and industry are important opportunities to really understand where microcredentialing might lie. And then finally, communities have certain needs. So these might be serving a need within the community for a skill or a capability for someone to bring to serve the community. It might be serving the social and economic needs of a community through a new sort of set of skills or capabilities. And so there are connections, of course, between the industry and the community, but also between the community and the learner. So being able to have learners be able to connect to the needs of the community and vice versa, again, are an opportunity around microcredentialing. And so at the intersection of all three of these things, learners, industry, and community, are really some exciting opportunities to use microcredentialing in very practical and authentic ways. So these often center around learning results. So can someone learn or do a certain skill in a new way? There's often an economic value proposition to them, again, creating economic wealth and generation there through industry support and community support and so forth. And then finally, a career level, being able to grow the capabilities or needs that it takes to be successful in a given career. And so these three things, again, sort of serve a foundation for understanding how microcredentialing works. Now, one of the key questions in all of this is how to understand how to meet those needs and how to design strategies in ways that are data informed and data based there. And so a way to think about that is a thinking plus data framework. So in this framework is really a simplified process model for how we might go about thinking about using data to inform the design of microcredentials. So at the start of this are really looking at questions, asking ourselves the question of what do I need to answer about this particular microcredential activity or microcredential program. So for example, this might be, what are the in-demand unmet skill needs that exist within a particular industry or discipline? That would be an example of a question that might drive our thinking around the design of microcredentials. Then we want to think about what data are needed to answer these questions. So these might be sources of databases that we look at. These might be interviews or focus groups. There's a lot of different data sources that we might draw on to help us ask and answer these certain questions. Once we have the questions and the data outlined, then we want to start to think about how we would analyze it. So how does the data need to be analyzed to answer the questions? This is where alignment really comes in, where what we're asking and the data that we have really needs to align well with how we are analyzing that data to better understand and inform it. And so, for example, if we are interested in looking at historical trends in a workplace or in an occupation, we might look at quantitative data to see employment trends over time within that particular context. Whereas if we're looking at sort of future perspectives around how anticipated needs in an industry, and maybe we've collected focus group or interview data. We're going to analyze those two different things in very different ways based on the question that we're trying to answer. So once we've done the questions, data, and analysis, then we can start thinking about insights. So these are insights or knowledge that emerged from the analysis. So now that we've looked at the data, then we can start to understand, what does it mean? And how does it make our understanding of those questions or the micro-credential program that we're looking to design, how does it augment our understanding about that? And then finally, we want to start to think about the actions that we might take. So based on the 4 previous elements, questions, data, analysis, and insights, then we want to start to think about, what do we do with that? And these are where we start to take meaningful steps towards developing or crafting our strategy for a micro-credential program. So these 5 elements of this thinking and plus data framework can really be a good perspective to use when we're using and analyzing workforce data, market data, to inform the way that we develop micro-credentials. So it's great to have this data and it's great to have this framework, but we also need to have a perspective and framework in which we set it within so that we understand the broadest perspective of things. So in order to do that, this is a tool called the Market Landscape Canvas. And I'm going to walk through each component of this tool in detail. But at a high level, what this does gives us a picture of the market in which a micro-credential might be designed within. So this is still very much in the design stage. We're trying to understand and make sense of data and questions that are there, but it helps to organize what can be a very complex and sort of layered process and makes it a little bit more actionable and focused to make decisions with. So on the left side of the canvas, we're really focused on the market dynamics. We're looking at competition, unmet needs, collaboration opportunities, and characteristics. We're also beginning to think about who the audience is and what do they need from a micro-credential within a given market. On the right side of the canvas, we're really looking more at the solution design to meet those market needs and dynamics. So this might be looking at the value propositions that a micro-credential might bring to the audience. The feasibility of creating it. Is it practical? Ways to differentiate it, because these are opportunities to really set apart what is created in sometimes a very crowded or confusing marketplace. And then finally, looking at the risks that are inherent within developing a micro-credential. As we look at the left side of the canvas, we want to start to think about the market at the center. So who is the market? If we described the sort of context in which a micro-credential is being offered, we want to define that as clearly as we can. So in an example here, it might be a city. It might be a professional association. We want to understand the market that we're trying to focus on with the micro-credential. We then wanted to start to think about, what are the characteristics of that market? Maybe they're a new employer to the region, or maybe they've gone through significant organizational change. These are characteristics that we want to understand to describe the market of the micro-credential would fit within. We also want to think about the competition. So in competition, we're not just talking about other organizations offering a competing product or micro-credential. We may be looking at other services that are available, things such as free and open learning experiences, or videos in YouTube, or even competition of not doing anything, of satisficing on the part of the learner, could be a competitor in terms of the dynamics that sit within that market. We also then want to think about the unmet needs within the market. So sometimes you may have a market and actually it has a need, but it's being served. And so we want to start to also think about, what is unmet needs within that market that we can look at. And these might be things like skill gaps. It could be new technology that has come to the market that doesn't have the support or the training behind it. There are a lot of different things that can inform that. Then we also want to think about the collaboration opportunities. So in micro-credentials, sometimes a great collaborator can be things like groups like the Chambers of Commerce, or local industry groups that are focused around a common goal of helping to meet the needs of that particular market. And so collaboration can also be a great way of being able to find opportunities to meet the needs of the market in a way that is synergistic of other activities that are going on. And then finally, we want to really hone in on who the target audience is within that market. So these might be individuals that we are going to be building a micro-credential for. The audience may also be sort of stakeholders or champions of the idea around a micro-credential, such as a manager or a director of an organization that is trying to meet a certain need that they have in their organization. So the audience can actually be multifaceted. It could be the learner, or it can also be a stakeholder within that. So again, the left side of the canvas is really designed to help us create a snapshot of the market and the dynamics that are within that market that we would be working in to create a micro-credential. Now, if we look at the right side of the canvas, we want to sort of start with the audience that we ended up with previously. So this might be who our learners are, who our stakeholders are, but we also want to understand the value proposition that they have. And so in order to get to that, we then want to start to think about what is the solution that we need to create. So this, in this case, would be a micro-credential program. It could be delivered through a weekend workshop. It could be online. It could be on demand. There's a lot of different features and characteristics about that particular solution, but we want to begin to define what that solution is and start to build a bridge between the audience, the solution, using a very compelling and important value proposition. So does that value proposition help them create career opportunities? Does it make them more money? Does it provide flexibility in their organization? Does it allow their organization to grow or address change in some way? So these value propositions are not necessarily the learning results that come from a micro-credential, but it's the value that is created by having the micro-credential in place. Once we've done that, then we can start to think about the feasibility of the micro-credential. So is it even practical to offer it? Sometimes we can have great ideas and a great need, but the cost or the logistics involved with meeting that need might be so great that it becomes not a feasible solution. And we have to go back to the drawing board, so to speak, to understand a solution that might be viable to meet the market needs. So there's a back and forth that sometimes comes from a lot of this work. We also want to think about the differentiators. So what are the things that make this micro-credential unique and special in setting it apart from other options? So again, this has a connection to value proposition and of course the solution, but also the feasibility as well. If you have a feature about the micro-credential that is so unique, but it's not feasible to implement, it becomes not a very practical solution in that way. And then finally, we want to think about the risks that are involved. Anytime you do something new or in uncharted territory, there are inherent risks that come along with it. It might be a risk of sort of a slow uptake of the marketplace, of understanding what the micro-credential is. There can be also risk of not doing something, of not creating the micro-credential or having it in place, of not meeting a skill need or a workforce need. So the risks that really come into play is understanding that dynamic across the solution and offering it. So it could be maybe there's limited startup resources, and that's a risk that has to be navigated in that particular space. So the right side of this market landscape canvas gives us a snapshot of what the solution is that we're trying to create that can align to those market needs. And the way they bridge is through the audience, through the learners there. And so if we're able to design solutions that are really have the learners at the center and understand the dynamics that sit around them, that becomes a very important framework for us to work within. So now that we've looked at the framework for organizing data, let's look at some various sources where data might come in. So a few data sources, there are, of course, proprietary tools, and I'll talk a little bit about some of those. There are also some free tools that are available when you go about understanding what the market is, the credential dynamics and the credential features that might go into it. One of these is called ONET. So ONET is a tool that is really an organizing of Bureau of Labor Statistics data around occupations. And so you can search through these tools and be able to understand what it takes to be competent in a certain field, or what are the growing skill needs within a particular career. So ONET is a great aggregator and an organizer of occupational related data. Another tool that is very useful is called Data USA. So Data USA combines multiple available data sources in a relatively easy to use interface. And so you can search industries, you can search careers, you can search occupations, you can even search other institutions, and being able to understand the dimensions that go into that particular question that you're trying to answer. And so Data USA can be a great exploratory tool and to also both validate certain assumptions that may come up through the design process. Another tool that is free is called Lightcast Skills Extractor. So this tool allows you to input a job description, a resume, a syllabi even, and it will pull out recommended skills from that particular artifact. And then you can go search and find the level of importance those skills have in the market. And so Skills Extractor can be a great tool to be able to use to be able to sort of organize beginning competency structures and understanding the needs that those competencies have in the market. And then the final example here of a data source is the Open Skills Network. This is a taxonomy of skills, so it's essentially a library of organizing different skills and competencies in a framework. And you can use this to understand the maybe supporting competencies that might go with a credential you're building, or it allows you to validate that the competencies that you indeed are preparing learners around are validated based on other research and literature around that particular area. So it can be a great tool for both curriculum planning and organizing for micro-credentials, but also validating work that is there. Now, a proprietary tool that is available is a tool called Lightcast, and this is available to many institutions. And what this tool does is it brings together a lot of the capabilities that I described in some of those previous free tools in a way that really allows you to take a next level view at the detail around job and labor data to make informed decisions around micro-credentials. So it helps us to understand what is the perceived need of a particular program that we might build. What are the skills that might need to go into it? What are some things we could do to even optimize the learner's value proposition out of a particular program that we create? So Lightcast can be a very useful tool. And if you're at an institution, you likely have a representative that has access to this tool. And so you can reach out and be able to connect to them to get various reports and to gain that insights around the data for the micro-credential you're building. So as we think about how all these pieces put together, you can have many different data sources, whether it be through the databases, through online tools, or even interviews, talking with people to understand the needs that are there. That's very valid and important data to be able to complete this market landscape canvas. So understanding the market dimensions, but also understanding the features of a solution that gets built are very important to crafting the very best micro-credential possible. And it really is driven by that analyzing the workforce needs, the market, and ultimately the value proposition that needs to be developed to meet the needs of learners. As we begin to put some of these ideas into practice, I want to encourage you to conduct a data practice exercise. So the first thing I want to encourage you to do is to collect data and information about the micro-credential you're interested in exploring. So this could be using some of the tools we've talked about here, the online databases tools. It could be even conducting first-person interviews with people and industry partners around their needs that they might have, or even focus groups. So the idea is to begin collecting data to better understand the micro-credential you're interested in developing. Once you've collected some data, I want to encourage you then to organize the data and information using the market landscape canvas. So this could be transcribing notes and information onto the canvas in the framework that is there. and being able to understand the data, not just independently, but in a collective sense using the various Canvas features and components. And then finally, we want to summarize the data and information into actionable insights and that can help inform what our next steps might be. So as we look at that canvas and being able to see the data on there, at that stage, you should be able to begin generating certain insights or surprises that come from the data. You will also likely want to begin formulating what are the actionable steps that we can do with that data to inform the development of the micro-credential. So this should help give us focus and clarity around what those steps could be in order for us to be able to build the program that is most relevant and most valuable for the learner audience. So in this lesson, we explored analyzing workforce data. We looked at a framework for thinking about data. We looked at a framework for organizing data. And then finally, we looked at some various data tools that you can use to highlight knowledge about the micro-credential and insights about the micro-credential that you are interested in developing. And then I would encourage you to put that into practice with this practice exercise to begin developing and using data to inform the development of your micro-credential.